Okay, so the international community, China have recently agreed a massive investment deal with the EU. China had promised to ban forced labor, but China also denies that there's any forced labor, and they also deny there are Uyghur camps. So that's you know to put it lightly, that's as good as the Munich Agreement. To be honest, it's probably worth less than the Munich Agreement. To be honest, um, because China are just denying that any of this happened. So how are the EU going to prove it? The answer is they're not. What do you think about that?
I think this is a very contentious deal. Um, I think that um, the EU should have insisted on ending forced labor in China before they agreed uh, to the agreement, because right now it just seems like um, they just wanted to make it look like they pushed China to take some action in regards to Uyghur repressions, but in reality, this is actually not what happened. It's all about the wording when it comes to international conventions and agreements and deals, and the condition was that they would promise to ratify international convention on banning forced labor, but like the promise is not the actual deed. So
Yeah, I
when
mean, you never believe a politician's promise. It's
mm,
the one thing. If there's anything they teach you in politics classes, when a politician says something, don't believe it until you see something happen. Don't believe what they say. Look at the voting record. Look at their actions. That's basic politics. And the EU making this deal is incredibly naive. I have special kind of condemnation for Germany for doing this, for agreeing to this deal as well. A very, very egregious thing to do, especially given the kind of narrative of, we never forget the past. Well, I think you've forgotten pretty quickly, Germany, to be honest. Um, the international community um, not doing a lot here. Where's the article gone? 30 nations, at the UN, 39 nations condemn China's abuses of the Uyghur Muslims, but, unless something happens from this, unless we see sanctions or we see boycotts and things like that, this doesn't really achieve anything. This is saying, oh, China, you, President Xi, you bad man, you've done some things wrong, you need to fix up. And President Xi saying, well, are you gonna do something? And the world community is like, nah, bro, keep the goods coming. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's nothing really happening from this. Um, you
mm,
know, kind of, what do you think about that?
yes, I agree, and this is again politics game. Um, well, everybody is trying to get their chunk of meat, and
Yeah,
this is
pound of flesh.
all
Yeah.
what yeah, this is all what this is about.
Um,
Um,
so yeah, 100%. I agree. It's incredibly embarrassing that the UN, especially with the countries involved within the UN, talk about humanitarianism and things like that, and then you kind of agree an investment deal with a country that has dealt with a minority group in one of the worst ways possible. Like I said, I think the only group probably worse is the Saudis in this respect.
mm,
And if we move on to kind of a next bit of this question, where you've seen kind of the UK take a stance against this. Surprisingly, Ian Duncan Smith um,
mhm.
leading a charge on this, and I'm thinking, Ian Duncan Smith, really? It's Ian Duncan Smith doing this. Ian Duncan Smith, really? Like, the man's one of the dumbest people in the Tory party. Um, and it's not the leader of the opposition. It's not the Lib Dems or the Scots or anyone like that. It's Ian Duncan Smith. Like, come on, man. And so, leading kind of a charge on this, you see, people coming through the courts in the UK trying to get some sort of ruling. Dominic Raab, saying that we're going to put sanctions on companies doing business with China that, where the products come through slave labor, specifically the cotton that comes from the Uyghur camps. You've got the US also imposing sanctions and cotton import restrictions on suppliers controlled by the Xinjiang Production and Construction Corps. So you've got individual kind of nation states, kind of putting up sanctions and, talking about condemning countries and the Conservative government looking for a reset with China. But realistically, what does this kind of stuff achieve?
Is yeah, that is questionable because um, I think until there, unless there is a coordinated policy and approach or stance taken uh, against Chinese repression of Uyghurs. Um, I don't think it will have that great of an effect on the Chinese government.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Like okay, fair enough. You're going to limit imports and sanction, some of the people involved with this. I mean, they're living in China. Like, what are you going to do? Close their British bank account? Like, no, they live in China. Like, they have a Chinese bank account. You're going to do minimal. You're going to do basically nothing to any of these people if you follow this strategy of, dealing with the kind of people involved within this without dealing with the politicians involved. And sanctioning Chinese cotton is a decent move, I guess. If I was going to give some credit, at least you're doing something. But on a
Yes.
whole, what does it actually achieve? What do you get out of doing this? It's just not much. It's barely a slap on the wrist for China.
It's taking the moral standpoint, and actually, it might encourage other countries to join this effort, and eventually, they might create some sort of coalition. But it is all very uncertain.
Because honestly, I could say if we had stayed a part of the EU, if the UK had stayed a part of the EU, we could have vetoed this trade deal, and then we could have actually condemned China, but we didn't, and we've lost so much clout in the world and so much ability to actually do something with regards to countries like China. But at the same time, if we actually really cared about human rights, we would have done more before we had left. But that's a separate conversation for a separate time, I guess. But what we can kind of gather, I don't know how much you agree or disagree with this, is the international community have done very little to help the Uyghur Muslims within China. I don't know how much you agree. I know it's a loaded question, but kind of, where do you agree with that statement, or do you think I'm being a bit harsh?
No, I definitely agree. Um, I think many countries are afraid to confront China on this matter because China has become an important partner for them in terms of trade and investment.
Mm.
So that's um, that's the main issue I can see behind this.
I mean, the Chinese government, Xi Jinping specifically, have been very intelligent in the way they've sort of sowed, soft power within,
Yes.
the globe. Things like the Brick and Road program, where it's massive
Hmm.
investment into countries to create, infrastructure from China to the Western world. You've also got, them rivaling the IMF and the World Bank in terms of, giving financial support to developing countries with them, instead of giving out, high interest loans. Um, what they've done is just take resources in exchange for infrastructure work. I remember seeing a documentary in first year where they talked about how much China is investing in certain African countries. Um, so it's very interesting in that respect. In the way China have gone about it, rather than using hard power, they've used soft power, which is far stronger in a lot of ways. Because by sanctioning China, you're in part sanctioning yourself and your own ability to trade and make money. I think that's kind of one of the points you were going
Mm.
towards, Clara.
Yes, that's a great way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah, by sanctioning us, you sanction yourself. Should be give them that one for free. I think that's a good enough one to talk about. And I think if we go to kind of the second half of the question, talk about the embarrassing kind of responses from the Muslim community. When especially when the Muslim community talk about being one body, one people. A lot of Muslim countries have been incredibly quiet when it comes to what China have done.
Hmm.
I saw far more outrage over President Macron's comments about radical Islam than we did over what China have done to Uyghur Muslims. With a boycott over French products. And sort of not just a government saying we should boycott these products, people actively boycotting French products over comments. Erdogan, I think, said Macron's mentally deficient or something like that, or saying implying he's got some sort of mental problems.
Mm.
Erdogan talking about rising Islamophobia in Europe, but he's been very quiet on China, Pakistan as well, Saudi Arabia, the home of Islam. Causing a genocide in Yemen, so they're not really to speak. They're going to try and keep their heads low whilst they're genociding a group of Muslim people. So yeah, Iran being very quiet as well, another Muslim country, an ally of China. So the only thing more embarrassing, I would argue, than the international response to what China have done to the Uyghur people is the Muslim community's response to what China have done to the Uyghur people. I know obviously you're not Muslim, and it's a bit different, I guess, you commenting on this, but in some ways. But I don't know how much you agree or kind of disagree, or if you've seen things to the contrary of Muslim countries actually standing up against China. What do you kind of think about that?
No, I'm afraid I definitely agree with you. And even though that's in the current state of affairs, there has been sort of a change of this trend whereby uh, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation tended to support China despite its repression of Uyghur Muslims. Like nowadays, fewer members of the organization now support Xinjiang policies and condemned its actions multiple times at the UN. But I think it is questionable to what extent this is actually a mere rhetoric in an attempt not to look like biased hypocrites.
It's true.
Yes, I definitely agree with you. They have not been doing enough, and I'm. It pains me to say this, but they act like so devoted to Islam and act so pious when it comes to the case of Macron and
I mean, yeah. I mean,
and the affair that happened with the history teacher, but then they are silent when it comes to actual oppression of fellow Muslims in China. So
100%. I agree. I agree with that. The actual. When that French cartoon company that always causes problems because by releasing cartoons that annoy people, which is kind of what they do. I can't remember their name, but you see far more outrage over things like that than you do over actual human beings being killed and enslaved by a nation state. And it's embarrassing that the Muslim community always reacts like this. Maybe if China released cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad, then maybe you would see some action over this. But given the fact that it's just human beings who are being enslaved here, no one seems to care. And 100%, I agree with the point you just made there. It is sad, isn't it? Where the international community has failed them, the Muslim community has failed them, and really, I don't know where this ends because I can't imagine any kind of global war where they go into China to deal with what they've done. That would end horribly with a lot of problems with with nuclear weapons. I think there was one thing I think you said earlier about the UN kind of helping with peacekeeping. I think the point I was meant to make was that I think it's just nuclear weapons that have done that with countries fearing nuclear mutually assured destruction. I think that one of the key reasons why no one's going to go to bat for the Uyghur Muslims is no one wants that scenario, which is the worst case scenario, and many countries don't want to lose money. Over sanctioning China. We've seen what a trade war with China has done to the US US farmers. They were decimated. They stood no chance in that trade war, and unless it's literally the vast majority of the world that sanctions China, I don't think anything will happen with regards to helping the Uyghur Muslims. Because I think President Xi is going to be in charge for a long time, and I can't imagine him changing strategy overnight or in the next few years. China obviously fear the Uyghur Muslims for whatever reason because they're a large minority within China and fear some sort of uprising. So instead we're going to imprison them and enslave them and humiliate them, which in all honesty is probably more likely to cause some sort of uprising within China and more problems within China. But it's just me. I'm not. I'm just some guy. I don't know how much you agree or disagree with that statement, but it's just a horrible situation for everyone involved, to be honest.
Yes, you're right, and sadly I have to disagree, and especially those coercive birth control practices that the government has put into place. This, in my opinion, indicates ethnic cleansing at minimum, if not signs of genocide.
Yeah, and sorry,
I don't see it ending very well for the Uyghur Muslims because if the international community doesn't change its stance very soon.
I mean, all UK and the US have done is put some sanctions on China, which is very small sanctions in all honesty when it comes to things like cotton, which again it's not something I disagree with them doing, but it's just not enough. And the UK kind of falling out of international prominence, something we've talked about kind of throughout this podcast. Um, it's just what kind of influence does the UK have in the world? Not much, especially compared to a juggernaut like China, which has put in place massive amounts of soft power with many nation states, even Muslim nation states as well, which is ironic given all that they've done. I can't see the situation changing much, which saddens me a lot, to be honest.
I agree.
And I don't know what more we can kind of talk about on this topic, except the only thing we could do is literally hope something changes, and that's about it. I don't know how much you kind of disagree with that, Clara, but it's a kind of sad way to kind of end this podcast, I guess.
Yeah, it will be ending on a rather negative note. But yeah, I agree. All we have to do now is hope, and maybe we should all try and help in some sort of a way, if it is advocacy, campaigning, and boycotting, Chinese products. Any way is useful at this point. Hopefully, our governments will eventually follow, even though I really can't see it happening.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe email your elected officials and ask them. Why haven't your elected officials done more to talk about this? I'm tempted. Maybe I'll email the Labour Party and ask them, like, why is it Ian Duncan Smith and Dominic Raab leading the charge on this? Why haven't you guys spoken about this? Where are you guys on this? Like, I can't hear you. I don't see you anywhere. But yeah, I don't know. I think this is a good place to end the podcast. Email your local officials, talk to them, and see why haven't they done more to speak out against the treatment of the Uyghur Muslims in China? Also, you could ask them why they haven't spoken out more about the genocide in Yemen or any other humanitarian kind of disasters that are happening right now, and a lack of intervention from other countries. But I think this is a good place to end it, Clara, if you're okay with that, unless there's anything more you want to add.
Definitely agree.